the place where singles shine, celebrating life, divine by design. In faith and love, we intertwine. Route 77, where your journey's prime.
Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. Last week, we dug into the dangers of focusing too much on marriage to the point of idolatry. This week, we're flipping the coin to explore what happens when we become too prideful about being single. How do we strike the right balance in our singleness? Let's find out. Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. I am your host, Natasha, and I am here with Monique.
Hello.
And David.
Hello.
And Monique and I are fresh back from Calgary. We hope that we're somewhat
Coherent
as we can't remember the word as we talk. Although we have chatted about this topic in the past, but we have an interesting topic for next week, but we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. But right now we're going to basically cover the other side of the coin.
Yes.
So to speak. So last week we talked about what happens when you become too marriage-minded, too marriage-focused, that it becomes an idol in your life. And then it might look like we're bashing marriage and it's so negative.
So now we're
going to bash singleness. And it's so negative.
Yeah,
so there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, you're stuck with us. Yeah.
But there is a big thing about just basically trying to hype up whatever you're doing as the best way and the only way. And I'm better than you because of, and we don't want people to go around saying, I'm single like Paul and I'm better than everyone else, or Jesus was single, so I'm single. It becomes a source of pride or idolatry. So last week we just talked about, focusing so much on marriage that we forget about God, that it becomes the be all and end all of our life, that we can't see anything outside of it. We get very much tunnel vision towards marriage. And then there can be a sense of pride of, look how good I'm doing. I got married. I had kids. I did everything that you're supposed to do in the way that you're supposed to do it. And it becomes a source of pride. So now we talk to the single people who might be feeling a little bit like, at least I'm not like that tax collector over there. Thanking God you're not that tax collector.
I am not like that person over there.
Yeah, I'm like that. I'm not like those married people at our church that are always just so focused on the kids and so focused on being married and trying to get people married that I miss out on everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There you go.
So I think a same type of thing can happen in the sense that you get tunnel vision about singleness. It happens, I think, differently, but it can become I see sometimes people when they're commenting on some of these dating sites or things that are single sites that I've been looking at on Facebook, they'll be like, why are you single? And then just as a thing for people to comment on it. And then they'll say things like, oh, I'm just I'm loving this and I don't have room for anybody else. And I don't want to have to start sharing. And it just seems not the greatest reasons why you're excited that you're single.
Oh, I have actually said those things. I don't have to share my bed or the fridge or my car or my money. Cool.
It is. But it can be a source of sin if it becomes your pride.
Oh, man. Excuse me while I go to the church to find the priest and confess.
And confess if you were Catholic.
I'm not Catholic. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned.
How many Hail Marys should you do? So I think too, though, we're in a cultural moment right now where independence is highly thought of. It's pushed as, even though they push you towards relationships, it's more, it is praised. And you're you should be able to, even if you have a person or don't have a person, you should be able to be you yourself and no one else, and you should be fine.
Yeah. Even if you do find somebody, you should retain your own bank account. Make sure that you don't tie yourself into a place where if you split up, you'll have to give up your stuff. Keep your stuff in there.
And I've even seen where people are they're completely happy with having long-term relationships, but keeping their own lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they have their own house, they have their own job, they have their own life, but they meet up and they do dating type things and they have sex and they do all these things as a relationship. But there's not even, it's more than friends with benefits. So they'll actually call themselves significant others or boyfriend and girlfriend or like, but they're still like, but we're happy being in separate houses.
That way we don't have to worry about having arguments and if we do have an argument, we can just go to our own places and.
Yeah. And we need some like a time away from each other. We have our own, it's like more than just having like, sometimes people just want a separate room in the house that's theirs and they can go and hide in their man cave or their she shed or whatever you want to call that stereotypical thing that they do. Yeah. But they're always like, they have those ideas. But then this almost takes it a step farther to be like you shouldn't need anybody else. You just get to have somebody. You don't need that person.
No. You just have them around whenever, and then you can send them home when you don't want them around. No.
Or if you do get married,
it's the non-committed. It's a not committed, no commitment.
It honestly terrifies me because it's the one thing that you can't really live without. The emphasis that you don't need anything else or anyone else, right?
Yeah.
And then Christianity teaches the opposite, that you absolutely need Christ in order to be
revived.
And God has made us, right? God has made us people of relationship, right?
Yeah. Because God himself lives in community with Father, Son, Holy Spirit. They are their own community. And so they designed us to do the same and to live in community. And a lot of people, they just don't want to do that anymore.
And we see it in the church especially since COVID, where it's, why do I need to go to church? I have the online service. I can watch 10 online services and sing with 10 online choirs or do everything in theory that you can do, but you don't have the actual family relationship.
Right.
And it's just, but they try to separate that. Oh, I'm so busy. I'm tired. So I don't really need to go to church because I have all that I need.
I can stay in my pajamas. I worked hard all week and
I'm resting. I'm just sitting here.
And I can have my coffee and my toast and I can just watch relaxed with my feet up and not have to. Yep.
And how many times have you heard that people use God as a crutch or the church as a crutch? It's something that you shouldn't need.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Oh, it's just you're just using church as an excuse to something.
Fill in the blank. Yeah. And you don't need that. You can have other things. What I find is interesting is because you actually see things like, say, the LGBTQ plus, however you work with that, but it's actually a community. It's people like that. One thing that's big about them is that they have almost like a thriving community within your identity, where they actually, I've heard them talk about how they know they can go to the other person's house. They know they can get help here. They know that they have support. And yeah, if we try to do that in like a religious sense, then we're like crazy people.
Yeah.
But there's just different ways. It's just because sexual identity, gender identity, sexual orientation has become like the new identifier of people. And we've talked about that in the other podcasts. So
it's almost like they've become their own church.
Yeah. And it's become the new community of being able to, except for cis white people, they can't have a community because then it's white supremacy to have a community. And it's just, it's just like what we see, like a shift from religion being that identifier to and an acceptable source of community.
Yeah.
To the sexual identity, sexual orientation, gender identity as being the place to go for community.
Yeah.
And so we're like so pushed in this society to be like autonomous, independent, not needing anyone, like the other person's there to meet your needs. If you have the other, like a significant other, they're there to make your life better. They're there for you to have the sex.
Mm-hmm.
They're there for, to give you support and comfort. That's the only reason you have it. You don't need them.
No.
But you get the purpose that you get these things, but you don't need these things somehow.
Right.
And
well, then that seems odd, very odd, because then you're only targeting a subset of people who are willing to submit to that aspect. You can't have a relationship with two people who feel the same way, believe that community is what it is. Right?
It just ends up with like basically leeching off each other until you can't get what you need or want.
No, but if one person thinks that the other person caters, then that other person thinks the other person should cater, you don't have a relationship at all.
No,
No.
it's just a take relationship.
Then there's not really a true
No.
You
companionship.
don't
of
even
what it
you
looks
don't
like.
even have a take relationship, Monique,
Yeah,
because
they
the
each
two
take
people
from
are
each
going to
other.
conflict anything from each other. If a person expects, say, if I expect my partner to do everything, and then my partner expects me to do everything, nothing gets done, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
Right?
Although, yeah.
So the people who expect that don't look for relationships in their same community.
No. 90% of the time with those kind of relationships, the only thing that they're looking for is a sexual partner for a time. And then they
And they can get the lovey-dovey feelings and a shoulder to cry on.
Yep.
Theoretically.
theoretically
But then if you become so attached to them that if we do break up, then you're like a mess, then you need to start being more independent. Like you shouldn't be so codependent and it shouldn't be so this and that. And again, you're trying to like work on yourself, make yourself like you don't need no man or don't need no woman or whatever. You don't need that.
and not realizing that kind of relationship, even if you think it's just a casual friend thing, you will start to develop attachments, even if you don't want to admit them to yourself.
And
Well,
sometimes David?
What people seem to do is they seem to look at what they can benefit, and then they try to mitigate the risk of emotional loss and whatever. And so what they end up doing is you separate the one thing that actually makes a relationship.
Yeah.
In order to have a relationship, you have to have that risk of
Yeah.
separation, the risk of loss.
And I think this might be something that's more the younger generation, like people that's technically around David's age. Because once you get to be around my age, that kind of relationship, it almost doesn't seem to matter anymore. And now you're just more or less looking for somebody just to be a companion with. Because as we age, our bodies do change, and those kind of things just don't seem to be all that important anymore. That itch doesn't come around as frequently anymore. Even just the idea, like for myself, because I've been single now for such a long time, not because I've wanted to. There's just nobody for me to date or even be interested in. Where was I going with this? So now it just doesn't matter anymore. I just don't care anymore. I'm fine on my own because I've gotten used to it.
Maybe that's what they see in their parents and those they see as mentors, is that they realize they see that kind of detachment.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't call it a detachment.
You've slipped into a comfort zone where you're just
To their
They
like
see that
roommates.
it doesn't really matter. They actually see from their mentors and their parents that things change and it doesn't really matter. So what they do is to combat this is that when they're young, I believe, is that they just say that independence is better over this, so that they don't have to deal with that kind of thing in the future.
Mm-hmm. And so it's really important that also what happens too, we saw what happened with the Catholic Church. Again, there's a whole history of why it came about, but then they put so much emphasis on celibacy and singleness that it did become like a god to them. Like they see that as a higher level of holiness. You get married and you have kids and you have sex because you're not quite as holy. You don't quite have what it takes, but it's okay. But the people who are like really, truly holy can come up. It's not even that they have the gift of celibacy in the sense that a lot of people talk about it. You just don't have that desire for sex. It has more to do with the fact that you're able to deny yourself that successfully. That's what makes you more holy in that sense, that you can overcome it's the asceticism. You overcome your physical needs and your physical body and your physical desires because you're more holy, like you're more spiritual. Again, like the body is evil, the spirit is good. That's the dichotomy. And we have to be careful that we don't just say things like, I don't need nobody, or I'm more spiritual because I can control my temptations. I don't need to do this. I'm better Christian than you. Or the fact that like sometimes what happens is like you just got so hyper. I don't want to share. I don't want to do what it would require of me to be the biblical husband or biblical wife. I don't want to sacrifice. I don't want to love sacrificially. Because it puts me out of my comfort zone. I'm used to having things so good in a sense. Not that marriage is all bad, like it's all horrible and you're just like sacrificing yourself all over the place and like it's the most horrible thing ever. But it's just that you get to yourself to the point where you're just like, I don't like if you don't ever have to give of yourself to anyone else. Like you can get to that point.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's sometimes good that even if you're single, that you actually live with somebody else. Like Monique and I living together, David, you have your roommate. Like it helps you to not get so self-absorbed that no one else matters and you don't want anybody. That's why you see some of these old people stereotypes where they're like crabby and don't want anybody in their backyard, blah, blah, blah. Because it's basically they've made their bubble so small, they want nothing to ripple anything in that. They don't want any single thing out of place. They get hyper clean in a sense sometimes where even if you walk in and you got a piece of mud on the rug where it's supposed to go, that's horrible. Or you move a pencil out of place, that's horrible because you get yourself so much.
Like, I know people who are married who are like,
yeah,
you do raise a good point there because that happened to me before I started Taekwondo. It was a block of time and I want to say it was 10 years, but I don't think it started right away in 10 years. I think it was probably more, say, 5. In 2012, I had to have an operation that basically negated me ever having kids again. It was an important one that I needed to have for a lot of medical reasons. But after that, I think a part of me might have did a bit because now the idea of not having any kids, what was the reason for me to get married again? Between that and when I started Taekwondo, I think I fell into a bit of a depression and totally cut myself off. I still went to church, I still worked, but I cut myself off from visiting friends, from phoning friends to talking to people. I would go to church, say hi, how you doing, go home. So it was homework, church, homework, not homework, because I wasn't going to school. And it wasn't until I started Taekwondo that I started to break free of that. Because they say exercise is a really good way to help bring you out of, I wasn't clinically depressed. I didn't need medication or anything like that. So if you're in that, what's the use of doing
it's like the work, sleep, eat cycle. You just get in this and nothing else is going to fit into your life.
No. And then when I started doing the exercise thing, which can help bring you out of that rut, then things started to change for me and I became a lot more involved and stuff like that.
I think for me, when I stopped seeing singleness as such a prison or curse or bad thing or whatever, it helped to really open up my mind towards singleness.
Yeah.
But then I think I needed a little time on my own away from my ex before I started going with someone else. God had a plan where I had almost a year just being calm and being able to have some sort of control over my life after going through what I did.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, it's enough now. You got to get yourself going into a different thing. So that's when he brought us together, Monique and I, as and even David, when we went to Korea, it was a big turning point for all of us.
Yeah.
That was the key point.
Yeah.
We'd just be Taekwondo associates of that if we didn't go on.
And there's that verse in Ecclesiastes where it says a cord of 3 is not easily broken. And a lot of people, they could put Christ as that one cord, but also with the 3 of us. Now we have knit a companionship that, that will go on into eternity because we do have that relationship with Christ and when we have built that friendship. Yeah.
And that's where like things like the accountability can come into things, because for singles, a big thing is that you become self-accountable.
Yes.
And that's it. And when you're in a marriage relationship or a romantic relationship, you usually start to think about what the other person needs or wants. And you have to discuss big purchases, or you have to
Healthy
big
relationship,
change
that
in a
is.
healthy relationship. Yeah. When kids come along, you start thinking about them. But when you're single and you're on your own, then you just can be like, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to do this. And then there's no sort of like accountability in the sense of needing to, or having someone there to talk about these things. Like Monique and I talk about a lot of stuff together, and everything from if we had a bad day to our finances to things, and even like getting pets. And Monique's like, no more pets. And I'm like, oh, please.
Just no more big dogs.
No more big dogs.
One big dog. Poor Zeus. If you got another dog, you would be spending all your time with him, and then poor Zeus would be like, nobody
This would
loves
be
me.
like, so sad. Nobody loves me.
So, but that is something that happens when you isolate yourself from the rest of society, or from companionship, or from friends. If you just do that work, school, work, home, work, church, whatever, you become, like you say, you become so self-reliant that if you do run into trouble, you believe you're the only one who can fix it. If you do have a problem, you don't know where to turn for help, and sometimes that can, that can weigh upon you, and then you got other problems start happening, and then it just, my life is spiraling out of control, and I can't go to anybody for help. So then you start self-medicating.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen too.
Yeah. And even like things like when we have, like, say you or I have an issue at work or something that we're really frustrated with, like how many times you get in a cycle of having massive conversations in your head, and they just go wonky ways, but they never come out even, like you never do anything about it. But then if we actually talk about those things with each other, like a lot of times it's just a sounding board, but getting it out in the open in a sense of verbally saying these things, that's how I actually did something. Like when it came to, I actually emailed HR with my other job one time when I was having an issue, but that's because I actually had a conversation and got it out of my head instead of just stewing on it and having these internal conversations. And it wasn't Monique going, yes, you need to do this. It was just being able to bounce it off.
Yeah.
Do you know the concept of the rubber ducky?
The rubber ducky.
All I can think of right now is the Sesame Street song now.
Okay,
Yeah, I know, right?
So in programming, what programmers do, and I actually have a rubber ducky on my top of my computer. So when we have a problem or we can't figure out a solution to something, we talk out loud to the rubber ducky. And that kind of, because that's what you guys reminded me of, is that you guys are the rubber duckies for each other. When you have a problem with work, you talk to, right? And it works.
Yeah. And I never thought that I was a person who suffered from anxiety attacks. But when we first moved into the house and trying to figure things out and stuff, there were a couple of times where I was just like, am I dying? My heart just doesn't want to relax, and I can't relax, and I'm freaking out and stuff like that. And then realizing that I was actually feeling anxious about something. I don't know what. But just talking it out and sharing that, what are you feeling anxious about? What do you think? Where do you think it's coming from? And just having somebody to help to direct your thoughts. And I'm not sure. And 90% of the time, it was because of finances and having a job that doesn't pay you a whole heck of a lot, and finding that you've got more month than money. And it's just like, this is not helping. So, and understanding that when we do run into a financial bind, that we can adjust to help each other out so that we're not having to suffer so much.
And then we tend to have similar thoughts. And God moves us in the same direction, nudges us both at the same time. And then we say, like one of us says it out loud. And I was thinking that too, just even renting out the bedroom and just
like
things like that.
Singing the Sesame rubber ducky stuff.
Yeah, the rubber ducky. It's all in our thing. We're all the same. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like accountability is important to have in your life.
Yeah.
And if you focus so much on being single to the detriment of anything outside of you relationship wise, that it's always kept at arm's length, then you will never have that.
Yeah.
You won't you'll keep your family at arm's length. You'll keep your friends at arm's length. all these things because you're like wrapped up in your little bubble in your house and you're like, I don't need nobody.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we do need people. We're always told to talk to one another so we can lift each other up in prayer, so that we're told to be a good friend by saying the truth to people, even if that's hard. And all those things, we can't do that if you're keeping yourself in a bubble. People can't tell you the hard things when you need to hear it, and they can't tell you the good things when when you're not expecting it. You can't have a fulfilled life without that relationship with other people, and it doesn't have to be romantic. And we talked a little bit about this, but how if we go so independent, we lead to the isolation, like Monique has talked about with her life, becoming a hermit. And like I said, there's a stereotype out there of the old cat lady or the grumpy old man, of where like you just stay in your house, you barely ever go out, you crack the window, get out of my lawn, and all that type of things. You're barely, and you can become them. Like, it's a stereotype because it's somewhat true in a sense when people get so, and it's usually because they've been long-term single people.
Yeah.
It's not because they were married and they became that together.
No, they were long-term single and shut themselves up in their homes and never had anybody come over, never went to go visit anybody, never called anybody, never answered the phone when people called them. So these are...
And I think it usually doesn't, it's not like it happens overnight.
No, it doesn't. And it wasn't until I had friends start pointing it out to me that I started to realize what I was doing. Thankfully, I didn't get to the grumpy person. I was quite content in my singleness, but I wasn't leaving myself open to possible relationship changes or
and disruptions to your life.
I didn't want that. I didn't want any disruptions in my life. I was quite content to do my own thing and have nobody bother me. And that's not a good place to be, because then you do become the crazy cat lady. Or
you had one.
That would only affect. That would. How do I word this?
Actually, you know where I was.
There's that scenario works if you have friends. I feel like there's moments where you have the elderly who maybe have went through traumas or they're old enough where all their family and all their friends have just passed away and they simply have no one left anymore.
My dad is in that position now. Talking.
Well, he has.
Yeah. My dad has now gotten to the stage with his Alzheimer's where he has to go into extended care. And talking with his wife, and she says, you know what, the really sad thing is that all of Dad's friends that he had have all now passed away. So she said, for his funeral, it's just really going to be us and the kids, because everybody else is already gone. And that is very sad. And that is something that happens as you get older, is that you watch your friends go before you and then you're the last one left. And that's a very sad place to be.
And I think that's why the Bible talks about widows and those who are older women are supposed to mentor and be there for the younger women. And I think men is the same thing. You're supposed to mentor and be there for the younger men. And that way
people don't neglect the elderly.
And don't push them away like they don't know anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we have a very big thing. We talk about like Gen Z, the boomers, the millennials, and we actually like cordon off people to their generation and be like, we can't interact with one another without it being a negative thing, because it's like the millennials don't understand, the boomers and the Gen Xers don't understand whatever the new one is, and the alphas or whatever they call them. And it's just it's a big craziness, because and even if you look at it in school, like how many times do grades, like you grow up in a school, but you only ever know the people in your grade. Like you might know of the other people because you've seen them, but you never really interact with them very often when you're outside of your grade level. You can do, it's not impossible, and sometimes it does happen, but basically like you become friends with your own grade and your own age, and everyone else is like other people. And sometimes in churches that can happen where it's like and it's not bad to have specific groups. It's not bad to have like youth and programs for seniors or like women's programs and all those things. But when we actually neglect having community events where everybody interacts with one another, then I think it can very much be you're friends with women only because you're only going to the women's thing, or you're friends with the youth only because you never interact with the adults, or you never like the seniors only because you never interact with the younger ones.
Right.
And so I think it's very important to have community events where everybody's getting involved with everybody. And I think it is a little bit easier with the smaller churches. I will admit that my old church, the one thing what's amazing was that everybody seemed to be able to interact with all the age groups without an issue. They'd have conversations, they'd talk, they'd do. And with smaller churches, I think that can be easier because you get to know everybody really quickly. And so they're not strangers because maybe there's 5 young people instead of 50. It's like easier to find out there's other people.
Yeah.
But in bigger churches,
our church
in bigger churches, it can be trickier.
Yeah.
And it has to be more.
You have to be more purposeful.
What's the word? That's the word I was looking for. Can't remember the word. Jet lag. I'll blame jet lag with the whole hour difference. But yeah, you have to be more purposeful in actually like developing those community interactions. Because like you said, as you get older, if God blesses you with a long life, then people can start passing away and there's less and less of your friend group or community around you. And you might end up being the last one of all the people that you know. If you don't actually make a try hard, like you actually make the effort to get involved in this different types of communities within the church or your community at large. If you just go to bingo, I'm just putting that as an example because we were talking about it this weekend. There's a stereotype about who goes to bingo. But if you say you only do that, then you're not, you missing out on maybe something else that you could do as well, or other groups that you can get involved with.
Right.
And so I think it's good if we actually look out there because there's things you can do for free. You don't have to be like, oh, I don't have money to do X, Y, and Z. There's things that they can do for free. There's lots of groups, and it doesn't have to just be at the senior center or church youth or whatever it is that can isolate you. Because I don't think when it talks about God, family being at all different parts of the body, we can't just send the eyes over there and send the ears over there and send the legs over there and never have them interact with one another. It would be a really weird body.
Yeah.
That's just my thoughts on that. So we've talked a lot about the negatives. It's so negative. It's so negative. Okay. So how do we actually be single in a godly way that doesn't diminish singleness, but doesn't create an idol out of it or a thing of pride? And I think we need to see again that singleness is a gift that is unique from marriage, that it has its own unique things that come with it that are separate from marriage. In marriage, you get some things, and singleness, you get some things. So to understand it, yeah, having alone time is fine. Having the ability to have independence from other things is fine.
Mm-hmm.
As long as having financial independence is fine. Like having time independence is fine.
I think you also have to be careful about overfilling your days too, to the point where you're just not even thinking about that you're single because you're just too busy and too tired at the end of the day.
Yep. And if why you're doing it is because you're trying not to think about it, that's definitely a bad thing. Yeah. But sometimes as a single person,
it is still idolatry because you're doing it for a different reason for the same purpose.
You're just trying to, if I don't think about being single, then I won't be saddened by it or depressed by it.
Exactly. Yeah. But we do have, and you don't have to just volunteer at a church.
We see, how many times have we see Jesus going off on his own, praying, talking to God, like having time to himself, resting, things like that. So he actually purposely takes time away
to be with his Father, to pray, to
be with his close disciples, like his friends, the close friends away from the multitudes.
Yeah, like the thousands and thousands. Think about this. He was followed by thousands of people for a reason. But there's also the getting away for a time, but also doing other things. And there are other, like you mentioned the meetups.
Yeah, meetup.com.
Yeah, where you can join activities with other like-minded people. Volunteering at the church is great if you've got the aptitude for what they need volunteers for, but not everybody. Just because they need a Sunday school teacher doesn't mean you have the ability to teach Sunday school. And
No.
don't stress yourself out thinking that's something you have to do. There are other
For my case, I basically work every Sunday, so I can't make a specific commitment to it.
No.
At the moment. I would like to eventually, but right now,
Yeah.
it just doesn't work.
And I do greeter because saying hello and shaking hands is something I don't mind doing that. And then, of course, I like technology and I like taking pictures. So sitting me in behind a camera is something that I actually quite enjoy doing that. There are things that you can do based upon what you like to do. But if it's something you don't like to, don't make yourself and don't force yourself and don't overdo it by volunteering for everything because they need lots of help. But there are
I can have a problem of time wasting.
Yeah.
Like when I don't have both jobs going, when I'm not going 1,000 miles an hour, I can be like, oh, I just need to rest. It's been really busy. I just need to rest. But then those rest times start to add up. Instead of it just being like a day or two, it's, the entire week goes by where I'm not doing anything except taekwondo. It's just, I had the entire morning. I could have been doing stuff. So now I'm trying to be more purposeful about spending it on the ministry. I have the time. So I'm trying to learn about social media, doing more stuff that way. But it's just, I have to be careful because as a single person, you don't have that accountability all the time.
No,
but it's not going to be on my case going, you should be doing something. It's not her job.
No, I'm not your police.
No.
And then you're like, so what did you do today?
I played my game and then I napped and then I went to taekwondo. It's just what happened to all the hours.
Nap. I needed a nap for my nap.
Yeah, I pretty much. Sometimes I get up late and then I play my game for a little bit and I fall back to sleep and I'm like, I don't need that much sleep.
Yeah. And one of the things that I want to do, and I'm really hoping that I can do that this coming weekend, because this weekend was a wash because we weren't even here. We were in Calgary. We had to visit our respective family members for various reasons. And so now, like literally before we started recording, we walked in the door.
Yeah.
And so, and it's already 9:30? Just to give you a little bit of at night, just to give you a little bit of a
window into.
Yeah, just as to what this weekend entailed for us. But I got a whole heck of a lot of ideas from my mom for what to do for decorations for Christmas coming up, and it's really hard to work in it. But now that I'm only doing one job again, I'm really hoping that this weekend I can get outside and clean up a lot of the plant boxes and stuff that I never got to do last year because I was working 6 days a week. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
Yeah. I didn't realize how brutal it was until all of a sudden it ended. And I'm just like, all of a sudden I feel a little bit more relaxed. So you do have to be careful about overextending yourself like that.
And I think God's not asking us to do that in a sense. Like he knows that we need to work, we need to have money to live.
Yeah.
And we need to be wise with the money that we have and earn. But also like when we start to overemphasize that, like I tell Monique, like Monique knows this, but last year I made more money than I ever had before. And I'm still in debt more than I ever have before. Obviously it wasn't because not that I was making millions or anything, but just more than I am now. But it's not like the needing to have more money in order to live. It wasn't obviously the reason because I'm living off of less right now. And I'm basically in the same boat as I ended last year, but I'm not worse. I'm not worse off.
So you're not expanding to your tank size.
And so to actually have the time, like sometimes I think God's, okay, fine, you're not working. So I'm going to give you like 2 jobs again. And that's what happened last 6 weeks. And I'm like, because I was like being lazy at home on my time off from WestGen or like my other job. And now I've just been more like, okay, I'm getting back into the ministry, not just doing the podcast, trying to learn more, get a little bit, because even the little bit that I did where I was a little more interactive, wasn't just like a blip post. I got more engagement on Instagram. Not a lot, but more from people even that I know and stuff that were like, that didn't even realize I had the ministry.
Right.
Catching that they actually stopped for a second.
Right.
And they actually read through it. And it's just better than just picture words. It was actually a little, and that was just something that I learned how to do this week. I was having a little fun with it and trying to figure it out. And it was actually quite interesting to see a little bit more engagement, even if it means nothing more views or one more view, anything. It's just learning process, right?
Yeah.
But that became more like I became actually excited about it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I want to do too, is I was starting to do a little bit of blogging, and then all of a sudden I ended up not being able to because I just didn't have the brain to think about anything anymore.
Yeah, it's overworking definitely kills the mental.
Yeah, it does.
I can definitely attest to that.
And I think that was something that God wanted to show me too, is, okay, I know that because it just didn't work out the way we were hoping for. God will also let you experience something in order to show you that's not where he wants you to go at this point in time. I think.
It also might push you in a direction you may not have gone otherwise, like hit you out of your rut.
Yeah.
And then you realize that there's other things out there.
Yeah.
So I feel like with being single, like almost, and you start to really delve into like Bible reading and praying and doing the ministry, because you become more focused of like aware of things going on and trying to figure out how it might apply, and podcasts and things like that. You actually feel God kicking you more here and there, or leading more. And maybe it might happen if you're married. I don't know. I didn't experience in that, but I think as like a single person, you're you, again, it says in Paul says you don't have the husband or the wife to like be splitting your attention on. And so when you're actually focusing, and if you're working 2 jobs and you're working all the time, then you're almost splitting your attention. But then when you actually calm down for a bit, there's actually a lot more God leading than we realize, I think.
Yeah.
So definitely alone time and calmness, and not having stuff 24/7, like bombarding us, definitely can like it's definitely a good thing. Even married people should be doing this, like having their downtime and alone time and quiet time. But it's hard to find, but
as a single person, you have to be aware that you can fall into that too much, where you start locking other people out of your life. And that's not a good thing.
No.
Yeah.
So I think basically just to recap on how to use your singleness in a positive way, in a sense of it being what God wants it, intends it to be, is that you do have your quiet alone time. You do have your independence of time and money usually, and all these things. But then you actually look how God wants you to use it. Okay. And so that might be volunteering at a soup kitchen. It might be volunteering at church. It might be doing this part-time job a couple hours a week. It might be that maybe is something that you've always wanted to do, or I don't know. I don't want to just be like volunteering for charity, because that's not just the only thing that it is. But you actually find he wants you to go to this small group. He wants you to do this ministry.
Maybe it's learning that thing you've always wanted to learn. Like for me, I grew up playing music, and I haven't played for a number of years, and now I'm starting to teach myself the piano, which is a very different instrument than what I grew up playing. So it's requiring a little bit more finesse on the fingers. It's something that I can do. Or maybe you've always wanted to take a crafting course, or maybe you always wanted to learn something. You never know what it.
Do your master's.
Yeah. Or get your master's.
Start your own company like David.
Yeah.
You never know. Write a book because you've always wanted to. There's
right?
that too.
You never know. Come on, David, you can do it.
There you go.
So, yeah.
And don't do which is going to be maybe next week's podcast. She's got to investigate a little bit more.
I'll do some more research, but if people are wondering.
4B.
4B.
I'll just leave that with you.
We'll leave it at that. 4B.
4B.
David, I don't know. David says I have no idea.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Sums up
if you followed anything in the media, you will know what I'm talking about.
You can Google it now. But yeah, I'll
leave the media stuff to you guys. I can't. I try reading that stuff and it enrages.
Yeah. Sometimes it causes, like I said, so much like the extreme eye rolling. You get yourself a migraine.
Yeah.
because you're just like,
Yeah.
wow.
My eyes haven't gotten so much exercise.
Yeah. If the rest of my body had that much exercise, I'd be so buff.
Oh my word. It's just unbelievable.
So yeah,
So
that's our plan for next week. So if you enjoyed our podcast today, please subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Like, leave a review, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X. We have a website, route77.ca, or you can even email us at route77ministries@gmail.com. That's ROUTE, 77ministries@gmail.com. And we will see you all here next time.
bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can leave us a review or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X for updates and more. Visit our website at route77.ca or email us at route77ministries@gmail.com with your thoughts. We love hearing from you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you here next time, and remember to live your single life to its fullest.